The public discourse is saturated with the physics of missile defense. It is a calculated diversion. Analysts from CSIS have noted that the kinetic cost of intercepting a hypersonic warhead is exorbitant. But this entire framework assumes the adversary's primary vector of attack is vertical. It is not. The true vulnerability is lateral and silent. While strategic attention is focused on shield mechanics, like those debated by Beth and Garwin, the systemic liability remains the thousands of miles of undersea fiber optic cable. This is the central nervous system of the Western financial and military apparatus. The cost to sever a node is negligible. The cost of its severance is a global solvency crisis. This is the protocol of asymmetric escalation. A kinetic event, such as the proposed seizure of Venezuelan oil assets, does not trigger a symmetrical naval response. It provides the casus belli for an adversary to execute a decapitation of the information network. The objective is not to defeat the fleet, it is to make the fleet deaf and blind. This creates the blind Leviathan, a state of absolute military dominance with zero situational awareness. Without satellite uplinks and subsea data, strategic command is severed. Greenland's Thule Air Base, critical for missile defense according to CNN reports, becomes an isolated outpost. The entire launch-on warning posture is thrown into chaos. When the screens go dark, the system defaults to its most lethal protocol. It cannot distinguish between a cable cut by a submarine drone and the prelude to a full-spectrum first strike. In the ensuing silence, every shadow becomes a threat. This is not warfare. It is the weaponization of uncertainty, aimed directly at the core of the nuclear deterrent. The motive is not strength. It is a solvency crisis. CSIS analysis of Russia's kinetic campaign confirms the model. Prolonged conventional warfare is an economic death spiral. It becomes a domestic liability, a mathematically unsustainable drain on the treasury that erodes public consent. This forces a pivot. When a state can no longer afford the kinetic cost of sustained symmetrical dominance, it must pursue liquidity through other means. The objective shifts from territorial control to asset seizure. The proposed action in Venezuela is a direct protocol of this crisis. The plan is not a nation-building exercise, it is an asset liquidation event. And documents outlining the intent to seize and revitalize Venezuela's oil industry are a blueprint for converting military hardware into emergency cash flow. The entire operation is structured around a single metric, the ratio of kinetic cost to barrels extracted. It is a desperate, short-term play for solvency, driven by weakness, not a projection of enduring power. This economic fragility is the accelerant. It forces a pivot to asymmetry because there is no other choice. A state facing a solvency event cannot afford a multi-year occupation. It must rely on short, sharp, kinetic actions. The math doesn't lie. The liabilities on the domestic balance sheet dictate the strategy abroad. This is not a choice made in a vacuum. It is a feature of systemic decay, where military action becomes the final, desperate tool of financial policy. The fundamental error is assuming the response will be symmetrical. By initiating an asymmetric action driven by its own financial weakness, the aggressor broadcasts its primary vulnerability. The motive to solve a solvency crisis becomes the vector for the counterattack. Adversaries will not meet this force in Venezuela. They will leverage this revealed weakness to attack the fragile, high-value, and undefended nodes of the entire Western Alliance, transforming a regional resource seizure into a systemic challenge to the nuclear deterrent itself. The kinetic cost equation has been inverted. According to analysts at USI, a $5 million main battle tank can be operationally neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a tactical anomaly. It is a 10,000 to 1 cost disadvantage that defines the new battlefield. The pursuit of solvency through force now guarantees bankruptcy. This is the math of asymmetric escalation. This economic inversion enables what strategists call the democratization of violence. The capability to project lethal, strategic force is no longer the exclusive domain of superpowers. It has been decentralized. Any state or non-state actor with minimal capital can now acquire the means to challenge a legacy military system, creating a permanent solvency crisis for conventional forces built on expensive, centralized platforms. Therefore, a kinetic resource seizure, such as the proposed plan for Venezuela's oil industry, is assessed on a flawed symmetrical basis. The true liability is not the cost of the invasion, but the low cost of the inevitable blowback. An adversary's response will not be symmetrical. It will be an arbitrage play, leveraging cheap, distributed weapons to attack a high-value, undefended systemic node, like the missile defense apparatus in Greenland, transforming a regional intervention into a direct challenge against the nuclear deterrent. The operational theaters are no longer confined to battlefield maps. The true staging grounds are the systemic fault lines within the Western Alliance itself, designated as gray zones. These are not targets, they are laboratories. Reports from authorities like RUSI and CSIS detail growing regional instability, citing official warnings from allied nations like Canada or flashpoints in the Southern Hemisphere. This is misinterpreted as random chaos. It is not. It is a controlled experiment. Each supply chain disruption, each manufactured social fissure, is a data point, allowing adversaries to calibrate attack vectors with zero kinetic cost. These proxy laboratories serve a single function: to stress test the alliance's cohesion and quantify response lag. While a proposed kinetic resource seizure in Venezuela, as reported by AP News and CNN, fixates attention on the Caribbean, the real maneuver is being rehearsed elsewhere. Adversaries use these gray zones to model the precise level of non-attributable pressure required to fracture a strategic node. They are not guessing how the system will break. They are running the numbers in a live fire exercise where the ammunition is economic and social friction, not ordnance. This protocol makes a direct military confrontation obsolete. Why engage a carrier group when you can incubate a crisis in a stable allied nation that forces it to nationalize assets or restrict basing rights? The objective is to force systemic triage. The target is not Venezuela. The target is Greenland. As CNN reports, a Venezuelan gambit immediately places Greenland and the missile defense architecture into question. The gray zone is where the blueprint for that asymmetric attack is perfected, turning regional instability into a launchpad for a direct, deniable challenge to the core nuclear deterrent. The nuclear command structure is not robust. It is a brittle, high-tension wire. The entire framework rests on a protocol known as launch on warning. CSIS analysis defines this doctrine with mathematical clarity. A nuclear response is initiated not upon impact, but upon the electronic detection of an inbound missile swarm. The flight time of an ICBM is approximately 30 minutes. The decision window is less than 10. There is no time to confirm detonation. The deterrent must be launched before it is destroyed in its silos. And this system has a systemic, exploitable liability. Its absolute dependence on data integrity. An adversary does not need to launch a kinetic strike. The primary vector is cybernetic. This is the fog of digital war. A malicious code injection targeting the early warning radar systems, such as those for which Greenland is a critical node, does not merely disrupt communications. It creates a data vacuum. Within the launch on warning protocol, a total loss of signal is not interpreted as a technical error. It is a predefined trigger, functionally indistinguishable from a confirmed inbound strike. The commander does not have the luxury of troubleshooting. The protocol dictates that a blinded radar system is the precursor to a decapitation strike. The choice is a mathematical certainty. Option A. Do not launch and risk 100% destruction of your arsenal if the data blackout is a real precursor. Option B. Launch based on the protocol, accepting the possibility of a false alarm. Fear is not the driver. Protocol is. The system is engineered to default to escalation. The human is simply the final component executing a pre-written strategic equation. The mathematical certainty of blowback dictates the protocol. Within 12 months following any escalation of kinetic resource seizure operations, such as the proposed action in Venezuela, expect a non-attributable calibration shot. The vector will not be a commercial port. The target will be a strategic node identified in risk assessments as a critical liability. The subsea data and power cables servicing the missile defense and early warning apparatus in Greenland. This specific vulnerability, linking regional interventions to alliance-wide uncertainty, was previously flagged by CNN. The event will manifest as a 48-hour sensor and communications blackout. Plausible deniability is a core component. The official narrative, supported by pre-positioned disinformation, will attribute the outage to a deep-sea seismic event or a cascading technical malfunction. As outlined in CSIS reports, the true source will be untraceable. This is not an act of war. It is a proof of capability. It is a quiet signal, primarily to allies like Turkey, who are now fielding sovereign defense systems, that the central security guarantee is no longer absolute. The strike demonstrates that the cost of achieving economic solvency through force is the exposure of the entire nuclear deterrent to systemic failure. This is the new price of intervention.